December 13th, 1943, 9:27 in the morning. 12,000 feet above Assam, India. Lieutenant Merritt Brennan pulled his Curtiss P-40N Warhawk into a climbing left turn and saw them. 64 aircraft, dark specks materializing through the morning haze 3 miles east, growing larger with every passing second, heading directly toward his base at Dinjan Airfield. Brennan was 23 years old, 43 combat missions with the 81st Fighter Squadron, 0 backup. He was the only American pilot airborne within 100 miles. The formation appeared as shadows against the brightening sky. 24 bombers in the center, 40 fighters arranged in layers above and below, a killing machine designed to obliterate everything on the ground before friendly interceptors could scramble. Brennan checked his instruments. Fuel gauge showed 180 gallons, 90 minutes of flight time at combat power. Ammunition counters displayed 1,850 rounds of .50 caliber across 6 Browning M2 machine guns. At 750 rounds per minute cyclic rate, that was 12.8 seconds of sustained fire. 12.8 seconds against 64 enemy aircraft. The math didn't work. His P-40, nicknamed Devil's Dice and marked with the number 44 in white paint, carried the scars of 8 weeks protecting the hump airlift. Patched bullet holes in the right wing, replaced windscreen. Fresh coat of olive drab over the engine cowling where Japanese rounds had torn through aluminum 3 weeks prior. Below him, Dinjan Airfield sat quiet in the early light. 14 C-47 transport aircraft lined up along the runway perimeter, loaded with critical supplies for Chiang Kai-shek's forces in China. A field hospital occupied the south end of the strip, 63 wounded soldiers recovering from combat operations in Burma. Fuel storage tanks contained enough aviation gasoline to support hump operations for 11 days. If the bombers reached the field unopposed, they would destroy it all. Brennan's radio crackled. "Hunter 2-4, this is Dinjan Tower. We have visual on hostile formation. Count 6-4 aircraft inbound your position, bearing 090 Angels 3. Advise your status." Brennan keyed his mic. "Tower Hunter 2-4. I see them. Request immediate scramble of all available fighters."
2-4 nearest friendlies are at Jorhat. Estimate 38 minutes.
38 minutes. The Japanese formation was 19 miles from Dinjan, moving at 240 miles per hour. Simple calculation. 4.7 minutes until bomb release. Brennan could shadow the formation, stay out of range, vector the scrambled fighters toward the threat. Standard doctrine when outnumbered more than 5-1, or he could attack alone. He looked down at the field hospital. 63 men who'd already given enough, who deserved to wake up tomorrow. Merritt Brennan grew up on a farm outside Kearney, Nebraska. 320 acres of wheat and corn. His father taught him to fix tractors when he was 8 years old, showed him how machines worked, how every system connected, how understanding the math meant understanding the outcome. On December 7th, 1941, Brennan had been walking beans in the South 40 when his mother called him in for lunch. The radio in the kitchen was playing Pearl Harbor, 1,800 Navy personnel dead, the Pacific Fleet burning. He enlisted the next morning, December 8th, drove to Omaha and signed the papers before his father could talk him out of it. "You're good with machines, Merritt," his father had said that night. "Maybe they'll make you a mechanic." "I want to fly, Dad." "Flying gets you killed." "So does standing still when someone needs help." Brennan trained at Lukefield, Arizona. Gunnery school. He finished top 3% of his class, not because he was naturally talented, because he understood the math. Lead angle, bullet drop, convergence point. Every shot was a geometry problem. Every trigger pull was a calculated decision. His instructors noticed. One of them, a former Navy pilot named Commander Hayes, who'd flown F-4F Wildcats at Midway, pulled him aside after a training flight. "Brennan, you shoot like you're afraid to miss." "I am afraid to miss, sir." "Ammunition costs money." Hayes had laughed. "In combat, ammunition costs lives. Yours or theirs. You'll learn the difference." Brennan learned the difference over the Bay of Bengal on his 6th combat mission. March 1943. He'd intercepted a Japanese reconnaissance aircraft, a single-engine Mitsubishi Kai 46 Dyna, fast, unarmed, running for home. Brennan had lined up the shot, perfect deflection angle, squeezed the trigger, 2-second burst, watched his tracers miss by 10 feet. The Dyna escaped. 2 days later, Japanese bombers hit an Allied convoy the Dyna had spotted. 11 ships sunk. 473 men drowned. Commander Hayes' words echoed. Ammunition costs lives. After that, Brennan didn't miss. 43 missions, 17 confirmed kills, 2 probables.
He'd learned to shoot fast, shoot first, make every burst count. But he'd never faced 64 aircraft alone. The Japanese formation maintained steady course. Brennan studied their arrangement. 24 Mitsubishi Kai-21 Sally bombers in the center, organized in 3 groups of 8. Each bomber carried a crew of 7 and 2,200 pounds of ordnance, high-explosive bombs designed to crater runways and ignite fuel stores. Escorting them were approximately 40 Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar fighters. Brennan recognized the silhouette, lightweight, maneuverable. Powered by a Nakajima Ha-1 1.5 14-cylinder radial engine producing 1,150 horsepower, maximum speed 329 miles per hour at 13,000 feet, service ceiling 38,500 feet. The Oscar could turn inside a P-40 every time. Its butterfly combat flaps allowed the pilot to bleed speed in turns without stalling. Japanese pilots exploited this advantage ruthlessly. In the previous 6 months, Oscars had shot down 63 Allied fighters over Burma and northeast India. Brennan's P-40N was faster in a straight line. The Allison 5 1710-81 liquid-cooled 12-cylinder engine generated 1,360 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. Maximum speed 378 miles per hour below 12,000 feet. But in a sustained turning fight, the heavier American fighter would lose energy faster than the lightweight Japanese aircraft. Standard P-40 tactics against Oscars were simple. Never turn with them. Use speed. Hit and run. Extend away. Reset. But Brennan couldn't extend away. If he fled, the bombers would reform and complete their attack run on Dinjan. 63 wounded men would burn in their beds. 14 C-47s would explode on the runway. The Hump airlift would stop for 2 weeks while engineers cleared debris and rebuilt facilities. He had to keep pressure on the formation, keep them scattered, keep them nervous, even if it meant fighting 40 Oscars alone. Brennan pushed the throttle forward. The Allison engine responded immediately. Manifold pressure climbed to 54 inches. The P-40 accelerated. Airspeed indicator swung past 300, 320, 340. He positioned himself 4,000 feet above the bomber formation approaching from the south with the morning sun directly behind him. The Oscars hadn't spotted him yet. Their attention focused forward on the target. Brennan had one advantage: surprise. Japanese pilots expected American fighters to meet them near the target area, not 20 miles out, not from altitude, not alone. He planned his attack vector in his head, hit the lead bomber formation first, ignore the fighters initially, break the bombing accuracy, make them scatter, force them to abort the run. The previous 8 weeks had been devastating for Allied airfields throughout northeast India. Japanese raids had destroyed 47 transport aircraft on the ground, 112 personnel killed. The pattern was always the same. Bombers arrived at dawn, dropped their payloads, vanished before American fighters could scramble. The Japanese owned the morning sky. Not today. Brennan checked his gun switches. All 650s armed. Gun sight illuminated. Pipper centered. The lead Sally formation flew in tight echelon. 6 aircraft arranged in 2 Vs of 3. Professional. Disciplined. They'd done this before. Distance closed. 2 miles. 1 mile. Half mile. The bomber crews still hadn't seen him. Brennan rolled inverted, pulled the nose down, dove at the bombers from their 7 o'clock high position. Gravity and engine power combined. Airspeed built rapidly. 360, 380, 400 miles per hour. The P-40's Allison engine screamed at full power. The airframe shuddered. Control surfaces stiffened under aerodynamic pressure. Range collapsed. 1,000 yards. 800. 600. Still no reaction from the bombers. At 800 yards, Brennan squeezed the trigger. 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns hammered in unison. The recoil vibrated through the control stick. Spent brass cartridges ejected from ports beneath the wings glittering in the morning sun. Tracers arced toward the lead bomber. Every 5th round burned phosphorus. Orange streaks walking up the Sally's left wing. Fabric covering tore. Metal sparked. The bomber's port engine erupted in orange flame. Black smoke poured from the cowling. The entire wing route shuddered. The formation broke. Bombers scattered left and right, their tight V dissolving into chaos. Pilots hauling controls, navigators grabbing anything bolted down. The lead bomber's wings separated at the root. The entire aircraft rolled inverted and entered a flat spin. No parachutes. Brennan pulled up hard. 7 Gs crushed him into his seat. His vision grayed around the edges. Blood drained from his brain. He tightened his abdominal muscles, forcing circulation back to his head. The P-40 arced through vertical. Brennan rolled right and looked back. 40 Oscar fighters were diving toward him. The first 4 came at him in a loose finger 4 formation from his 10 o'clock high. Brennan recognized the tactic. Schwarm. The Germans had taught it to the Japanese. 4 fighters working together. Mutual support. Overlapping fields of fire. The lead Oscar opened fire at 600 yards. Too far. 7.7mm rounds arced beneath Brennan's wing. White smoke trails from tracer elements. Brennan rolled left, pulled the nose up, fired a 2-second burst at the lead fighter. His 50 caliber rounds converged at 300 yards. Standard convergence point for P-40 armament, but the Oscar had already broken right. Brennan's tracers missed high by 50 feet. The Oscar's wingman followed his leader. The second section split wide, attempting to bracket Brennan from both sides. Classic pincer. Forced the American to commit to one threat, kill him from the other side. Brennan reversed hard, dove away to maintain speed, airspeed built, 280, 300, 320. 2 more Oscars dove from above. Brennan saw them at 400 yards, pulled into a climbing left turn, fired again, no hits. His ammunition counter showed 1,450 rounds remaining across all 6 guns. He'd expended 400 rounds in 2 attacks, approximately 6 more attacks at his current rate of fire. Behind the fighter screen, the Sally bombers were attempting to reform. 3 groups of 6 aircraft, each closing back into formation. If they achieved their bombing V again, they would press the attack. Brennan had perhaps 90 seconds before they reached their release point over Dinjan. He rolled out, shoved the throttle to the stop, dove toward the bombers again. 8 Oscars followed him down. The P-40 accelerated rapidly in the dive, 405 miles per hour. The Oscars couldn't match that speed. Their lighter airframes and lower wing loading limited dive performance. Brennan opened the gap, pulled out at bomber altitude, lined up on the right-hand Sally formation, range 300 yards. He fired. Tracers converged on the lead bomber's right engine. The Mitsubishi Ha 101 14-cylinder radial engine exploded in a fireball. Orange flame washed over the wing. The bomber rolled right, streaming fire and debris. Its wingman broke formation to avoid collision. Brennan kicked right rudder, skidded left, fired at another Sally. His rounds punched through the bomber's thin fuselage skin. The Ki-21 had no armor protection for the crew, no self-sealing fuel tanks. Designed in 1936, it was obsolete by 1943 standards. But it could still carry enough bombs to destroy everything on Dinjan Airfield. The Oscar fighters were closing again. 12 of them this time. Brennan checked his gauges. Fuel showed 162 gallons remaining. Ammunition counter read 1,300 rounds. The bombers were 17 miles from Dinjan. He had perhaps 4 minutes before they reached drop range. Then his engine started overheating. The Allison Phi 1710-81 was a liquid-cooled engine. Coolant circulated through passages in the cylinder heads and absorbing heat from combustion. The heated coolant flowed through a radiator mounted beneath the fuselage, where ram air cooled it before it cycled back through the engine. At combat power settings above 50 inches of manifold pressure, the engine generated extreme temperatures. The coolant system was designed to handle sustained operation at those settings for approximately 20 minutes. Brennan had been running at full power for 11 minutes. His coolant temperature gauge showed 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal operating temperature was 210. At 250, the engine would begin to fail. Detonation in the cylinders. Pre-ignition from excessive heat. Eventually catastrophic seizure. He had 3 options. Reduce power, let the engine cool, abandon the attack and return to base. Or continue fighting and risk engine failure over hostile territory. The Sally bombers were 15 miles from Dinjan. Still within bombing range. Still a threat. Brennan kept the throttle forward. 2 Oscars came at him head-on. Closing speed exceeded 600 miles per hour. Both fighters opened fire at 500 yards. Brennan saw their muzzle flashes. 7.7mm tracers walking toward his nose. He fired back. His heavier 50 caliber rounds carried more kinetic energy and reached farther. At 350 yards, his rounds hit the left Oscar's engine cowling. The lightweight fighter shuddered. White coolant vapor streamed from beneath the cowling. The Oscar broke left, trailing a condensation cloud. Its wingman followed. Brennan rolled right and dove. His coolant temperature hit 240 degrees. The Sally bombers were 13 miles from target. 2 formations of 6 aircraft each had reformed into bombing V's. The third formation was scattered, 3 bombers struggling to rejoin. Brennan went for the lead formation again. 6 Oscars tried to intercept him. He dove past them at 390 miles per hour, too fast for them to follow without ripping their wings off. At bomber altitude, he leveled out and opened fire on the lead Sally. His first burst hit the bomber's right wing root. The wing structure failed. Metal spars buckled. The outer panel folded upward and tore away from the fuselage. The Sally rolled inverted and entered a spin. No parachutes. The crew rode it down. The formation broke again. Bombers scattered in 3 directions, their bombing accuracy destroyed. Even if they dropped now, their bombs would spread across miles of jungle instead of concentrating on the airfield. Brennan pulled up hard. His coolant temperature gauge showed 248 degrees. The engine was running rough. He could feel vibration through the control stick, detonation starting in the cylinders, metallic hammering from the combustion chambers. If he didn't reduce power soon, the engine would seize. 8 Oscars dove on him from above. He saw them late, rolled left, too slow. 7.7mm rounds punched through his right wing. Fabric tore, metal buckled. One round hit his right aileron control rod. The aileron response went mushy. He needed more right stick pressure to maintain level flight. Another burst walked up his fuselage. Rounds sparked off his engine cowling. One penetrated the coolant reservoir behind the firewall. Green coolant sprayed across his windscreen. The engine temperature gauge climbed past 260 degrees. Steam erupted from the cowling seams. His oil pressure began dropping. The Allison was dying. Brennan chopped the throttle. Engine RPM fell from 3,000 to 2,400. Not enough power to maintain altitude. The P-40 started descending. 1,000 feet per minute, then 1,500. The Oscars were circling above him, waiting. Brennan's hands were steady on the controls, his breathing calm. The math was simple now. Fuel remaining. 73 minutes. Distance to home base at Nguli, 43 miles. Current airspeed, 180 miles per hour. Time required, 14.3 minutes. The numbers worked. Barely. But his engine was cooking itself to death. Coolant temperature 265 degrees and climbing. Oil pressure dropping. Steam pouring from every seam in the cowling. He had perhaps 3 minutes before catastrophic failure. Below him, the jungle stretched green and endless. Japanese patrols operated throughout this region. Bail out here, he'd be captured or killed. Behind him, the Sally bombers were 13 miles from Dinjan, turning southeast, heading back toward Burma. The raid was broken. The airfield was safe. Brennan turned southwest, toward Nguli, toward home. 6 Oscars followed him, not attacking, just watching, waiting for the inevitable. His coolant temperature gauge needle trembled at 270 degrees, far beyond red line. The engine should have seized already. Pistons should have welded to cylinder walls. But the Allison kept running. Rough, sick, dying. But running. Brennan talked to his aircraft. Quiet words no one else would hear. "Come on, girl. Just a little further. You've done good today. Real good. But I need you to hold together just a little longer." The engine answered with a shudder. A cough. A grinding vibration that rattled his teeth. Then smoke began filling the cockpit. Not from the engine fire, from electrical wiring behind the instrument panel. The rounds that had hit his fuselage had severed control cables and damaged the electrical system. Smoke burned his eyes and throat. Brennan slid the canopy open. Wind blast cleared some of the smoke, but the slipstream made breathing difficult. His airspeed fell to 160 miles per hour. The Oscars backed off. They weren't going to waste ammunition. The American pilot was already dead. His aircraft crippled, the engine dying. He would crash in the jungle. They circled higher, watching him descend. Brennan's vision was narrowing. Grey edges creeping in from the periphery. Carbon monoxide from the electrical fire, poisoning his blood, starving his brain of oxygen. He shook his head, focused on the horizon, on the instruments, on staying conscious. Altitude 4,000 feet. Airspeed 140. Oil pressure 0. Coolant temperature off scale. The math was changing. The numbers no longer worked. He wasn't going to make it home. At 6,000 feet, Merritt Brennan's right aileron control cable snapped. The steel cable had been damaged 20 seconds earlier when a 7.7mm round punched through the wing root. The round had nicked the cable, frayed it, left it holding by perhaps 30% of its original strength. Now, under the stress of a hard right turn, it parted. The sound was almost musical, a sharp twang like a guitar string breaking. Then silence. The aileron flopped to full deflection, no longer connected to the control stick, free to move with the airstream. The aerodynamic force on the uncontrolled surface was immediate. The right wing dropped, hard. The P-40 rolled right, 40 degrees, 60, 90, inverted, then past inverted, 120 degrees. The nose dropped. Brennan hauled back on the control stick with both hands. Full aft pressure, arms locked, shoulders straining. Nothing. The elevator cables were damaged too, cut or jammed or bent. He had no pitch control. The stick moved, the cables transmitted force, but the elevators didn't respond. The nose stayed down. The P-40 entered a dive. Airspeed built rapidly. 200 miles per hour, 220, 240. The jungle rushed up at him. Green canopy filling his windscreen. Individual trees becoming visible. Altitude 3,000 feet, 2,500, 2,000. The airspeed indicator showed 270 miles per hour and climbing. At this angle, at this speed, impact would come in approximately 8 seconds. Brennan's mind raced through the physics. The damaged aileron was forcing the right wing down. Aerodynamic pressure on the deflected surface. Constant force. Uncontrollable. The broken elevator cables left the horizontal stabilizer locked in whatever position it had been in when the cables jammed. Probably slightly nose down from his last input. Gravity was pulling the aircraft toward the ground. 16 feet per second squared. Accelerating. 3 forces, all pushing him toward death. But forces worked in both directions. If he rolled the aircraft inverted, the damaged aileron would force the right wing up instead of down. The same aerodynamic pressure. Reversed direction. The elevator locked in nose-down trim would push the tail down when inverted, which meant nose up. Gravity would still pull toward the ground, but with the nose up, he could trade airspeed for altitude. Convert kinetic energy to potential energy. Basic physics. Conservation of energy. Action and reaction. Flying upside down would reverse the control inputs. The damage that was killing him right side up might save him inverted. Altitude 1,800 feet, 1,500, 1,200. Brennan rolled the P-40 completely inverted. The world flipped. Sky became ground. Ground became sky. His brain struggled to process the reversal. -1G pressed him against his shoulder straps. The webbing cut into his shoulders. Blood rushed to his head. Pressure built behind his eyes. His vision turned red around the edges. Petechial hemorrhaging in the retina. Capillaries bursting from -G stress. The fuel system designed for +G loads struggled. The fuel pump couldn't maintain pressure when inverted. Air entered the fuel lines. The Allison engine coughed, sputtered, backfired, nearly quit. Brennan's right hand moved to the fuel mixture control, enriched the mixture, gave the engine more fuel to compensate for the air bubbles in the lines. The Allison caught again, running rough, shaking the entire airframe, but running, producing power. The nose came up, slowly, reluctantly, fighting against momentum and inertia, but coming up. The descent slowed. 2,000 feet per minute, 1,500, 1,000. At 1,200 feet altitude, the P-40 leveled out.
Flying upside down, 140 miles per hour.
Brennan held the inverted attitude, his entire body weight suspended by the shoulder straps. His arms ached from holding the stick position. His vision remained red-tinged, but he was climbing. 50 feet per minute, almost imperceptible, but climbing. Altitude 1,250 feet, 1,300, 1,350. Then the fuel starvation problem returned. The engine began cutting out, power dropping, RPM fluctuating. The carburetor couldn't maintain fuel flow inverted for more than 40 seconds. Brennan had 2 choices. Stay inverted and let the engine quit, or roll upright and let the damaged controls push him back into a dive. He chose the dive. He rolled right side up. Immediately the damaged aileron forced the right wing down. The jammed elevator pushed the nose down. The P-40 descended. 600 feet per minute, altitude 1,300 feet, 1,200, 1,100. At 1,000 feet, Brennan rolled inverted again. The nose came up. He climbed 200 feet before fuel starvation forced him to roll upright again. The pattern emerged. Inverted climb 50 to 100 feet, duration 30 to 40 seconds, limited by fuel starvation. Upright, descend 200 to 300 feet, duration 20 to 30 seconds, limited by rapidly increasing dive angle. Net loss, 100 to 200 feet per cycle. Brennan did the math. Current altitude 1,000 feet, net loss per cycle 150 feet, cycles remaining 6, maybe 7. Then he'd hit the jungle, unless he could maintain the pattern long enough to reach clear terrain, or unless the engine quit completely and the decision was made for him. He settled into the rhythm. Flip, climb, flip, descend, flip, climb. His arms burned, his vision pulsed between normal and red. His inner ear screamed confusion. The human vestibular system wasn't designed for repeated inversions, but he maintained the pattern. Above him, 6 Nakajima-ki 43 Oscar fighters circled. Lieutenant Yamamoto Kenji watched the American P-40 through his canopy, watched it flip inverted, climb, flip upright, descend, flip inverted again.
Yamamoto was 25 years old. 73 combat missions, 16 confirmed kills. He'd fought American P-40s before, shot down 4 of them. He'd never seen anything like this. He keyed his radio. "Flight, this is Yamamoto. The American is flying inverted, repeatedly." His wingman's voice crackled back. "Inverted why?" "I don't know. His aircraft is damaged. Maybe his controls are reversed." "Should we attack?" Yamamoto watched the P-40 flip again. Climb another 100 feet. Flip upright. Descend. "No, he's already dying. His engine is smoking. He's losing altitude. The jungle will kill him. But if he reaches his base, he won't. He's 20 miles from base, losing 100 feet per minute net. He'll crash in 10 minutes. Yamamoto's wingman was quiet for a moment. Permission to close and confirm kill. Yamamoto considered. Standard procedure was to confirm kills, close to visual range, watch the enemy aircraft crash, or see the pilot bail out. But something about this situation felt wrong. The American pilot had attacked 64 Japanese aircraft alone, had broken their formation, had forced them to abort the mission, had continued fighting with a damaged burning aircraft. Now he was flying inverted, refusing to quit, refusing to bail out, clawing for altitude with a technique Yamamoto had never seen before. Either the pilot was insane, or he was the most determined enemy Yamamoto had ever faced. Either way, closing on him felt like disrespecting a worthy opponent. "Negative," Yamamoto said. "We return to base. Let him die with honor." "But Yamamoto-san," "That's an order. Form up. Course 120. The 6 Oscars turned southeast, toward Burma, leaving Brennan to his fate. Yamamoto looked back once, saw the P-40 flip inverted again, still fighting. He whispered words the American pilot would never hear. "You fought well, enemy. May your ancestors honor your courage." Then he turned forward and flew home. Brennan continued his rolling climb. Altitude 1,500 feet, 2,000, 2,500. His fuel gauge showed 83 gallons. The math said 55 minutes remaining at current consumption rate. His oil pressure gauge showed 0. The needle had been pegged at 0 for 9 minutes now. The Allison 51710 engine ran on oil pressure to lubricate its connecting rods, crankshaft and camshaft. Without oil pressure, metal ground directly against metal. Friction generated heat. Heat caused expansion. Tolerances closed. Components should seize, but hadn't. The engine kept running, producing perhaps 60% power, shaking badly, making sounds no engine should make, metallic grinding, knocking, rattling, but running. Brennan didn't understand why. Thermodynamics said the engine should have seized 3 minutes ago. Metallurgy said the connecting rods should have welded to the crankshaft. But physics also said a bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly. Sometimes things worked, despite the math saying they shouldn't. Altitude 3,000 feet, 3,500, 4,000. Below him, the jungle gave way to agricultural land, rice paddies, small villages, then rougher terrain again. Ahead, 21 miles southwest, was Nguli Airfield. Home. Brennan checked his calculations. Distance 21 miles. Airspeed 140 miles per hour during inverted climbs, 180 during upright descents. Average 160 miles per hour. Time required 7.8 minutes. But he was still losing altitude, 150 feet per cycle. He'd need approximately 40 more cycles to cover 21 miles. 40 cycles times 150 feet equals 6,000 feet of altitude loss. Current altitude 4,000 feet. He'd crashed 2,000 feet short of the runway. The math didn't work, unless he could extend his glide somehow, reduce drag, increase efficiency, or unless his engine quit and he became a glider entirely. Then different math applied. At 5,000 feet, Brennan spotted Nguli Airfield, the runway, the tower, the revetments, dispersed aircraft, safety, 8 miles away. Then his engine quit. Not dramatically. No explosion. No sudden failure. It simply stopped producing power. The propeller continued windmilling, driven by airflow, but the combustion had stopped. No fuel reaching the cylinders. Or the fuel pump had finally failed. Or something internal had seized. The result was the same. 0 thrust. The P-40 became a glider. Brennan rolled upright immediately. Established best glide speed, 90 miles per hour. The speed that gave maximum distance per foot of altitude lost. Altitude 5,000 feet. Distance to runway 8 miles. Glide ratio for a P-40 in perfect condition approximately 8:1. From 5,000 feet, perfect glide distance 7.6 miles. He needed 8 miles, but his aircraft wasn't in perfect condition. 27 bullet holes disrupted airflow, damaged cowling, torn fabric on control surfaces, all created additional drag. His actual glide ratio was probably closer to 6-1. From 5,000 feet, 5.7 miles maximum glide. He needed 8 miles. He was going to crash 2.3 miles short of the runway. Brennan looked down. Jungle, dense vegetation, no clearings, no roads, nothing but trees. A crash there meant death. The aircraft would hit the canopy at 90 miles per hour, cartwheel through the trees, disintegrate, fire. He'd survived 64 enemy aircraft, survived a burning engine, survived flying inverted for 11 minutes. He would die in the jungle, 2 miles from safety. Because his glide ratio was insufficient. Unless. Brennan remembered something from training. A throwaway comment from an instructor at Luke Field. Commander Hayes, the former Navy pilot. They'd been discussing glide performance, comparing different aircraft. Someone had asked about unusual techniques. Hayes had mentioned that some aerobatic pilots claimed inverted glides produced less drag under specific conditions. Something about the wing's camber. The way airflow separated from the upper surface. No one had taken it seriously. It was theoretical, unproven, possibly incorrect. But Brennan had nothing to lose. At 4,500 feet altitude, 6 miles from the runway, he rolled inverted. Blood rushed to his head again. Vision reddened. His inner ear protested violently, but he held the inverted attitude and watched his descent rate. Right side up, 800 feet per minute descent rate. Inverted, 600 feet per minute descent rate. 25% improvement. The physics made sense now that he thought about it. The P-40's wing had a cambered airfoil, curved on top, flatter on bottom, designed to generate lift when right side up. Inverted, that camber was reversed. The curved surface was on bottom. Air flowing under the wing created a low-pressure area, which tried to pull the aircraft down. But the overall drag was less. Something about flow separation. Boundary layer effects. Brennan didn't fully understand the aerodynamics, but the numbers were clear. Right side up 6-to-1 glide ratio, inverted approximately 7.5-to-1 glide ratio, from 4,500 feet 6.4 miles. He needed 6 miles. The math worked, barely. Brennan committed to the inverted glide, both hands on the stick, maintaining precise 90 miles per hour, watching the runway grow slowly larger. His vision was fading. Grey tunnels closing in from the edges, carbon monoxide poisoning from the cockpit smoke, negative G stress, hypoxia from restricted blood flow. His hands trembled on the controls. 5 miles to runway, altitude 3,500 feet, 4 miles, altitude 2,500, 3 miles, altitude 1,500, 2 miles, altitude 800, 1 mile, altitude 400. He was going to make it, but he faced a new problem. He needed to land. Landing meant rolling upright. Rolling upright meant the damaged controls would immediately push his nose down. At 400 feet altitude, he had perhaps 5 seconds from upright to impact. Not enough time to flare, not enough time to adjust, not enough time to do anything except crash, unless he timed it perfectly. Brennan calculated. Descent rate inverted 600 feet per minute, equals 10 feet per second. Current altitude 400 feet. Time remaining 40 seconds. Distance to runway threshold half mile, at 90 miles per hour 20 seconds. He needed to stay inverted for 20 more seconds. Then, roll upright directly over the runway threshold. Use the last 5 seconds and 400 feet to flare and touch down. Perfect timing required. No margin for error. Brennan counted in his head. Watching the runway, watching his altitude. 30 seconds to threshold, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. His vision was almost gone. Grey tunnels, red edges. He could barely see the instruments. 5 seconds. At 300 yards from the runway threshold, 200 feet altitude. Merritt Brennan rolled right side up. The damaged aileron immediately pushed the right wing down. He countered with full left stick, fighting against aerodynamic forces he couldn't control. The nose wanted to drop. He pulled back. The jammed elevator gave him partial response. Not much. Maybe 10%. Just enough. The P-40's nose stayed level, wings wobbling, barely controllable. He crossed the threshold at 90 feet altitude, still descending at 500 feet per minute. Too fast, too steep. On the ground below, Technical Sergeant Clayton Whitmore stood at a .50 caliber machine gun position with 3 other ground crew. They'd been tracking the inverted P-40 for the past 2 minutes. Whitmore had his binoculars raised, watching. He'd seen the aircraft flip upright, seen it wobble, seen smoke trailing from the engine, seen the gear extended. "That's one of ours," he said. Private Martinez, manning the gun, kept his hands on the weapon. "You sure, Sarge, coming in inverted like that?" "I saw the number, 44. That's Lieutenant Brennan's bird." "Devil's dice." "Yeah." They watched Brennan cross the threshold, descending fast. "He's not going to make it," Martinez said. "Hold fire," Whitmore ordered. The P-40 dropped toward the runway. 90 feet. 60, 40. At 20 feet, Brennan pulled back hard on the stick, using every bit of control authority he had left. The nose came up. Slightly. The descent slowed. Marginally. At 10 feet, the main wheels touched concrete. Hard. 7G impact. The landing gear struts compressed fully. Bottomed out. Metal on metal. The right main gear collapsed. The strut buckled. Failed. The right wheel separated from the airframe. The right wing dropped. The wing tip hit the runway. Aluminum scraped concrete. Sparks erupted. The P-40 ground looped. Spinning right. 180 degrees. Still traveling backward at 40 miles per hour. The tail wheel disintegrated. The empennage dragged on concrete. More sparks. The smell of burning metal and rubber. The aircraft skidded backward for 200 feet. And stopped. Smoke poured from the engine cowling. Fuel leaked from ruptured lines. The right wing was shredded. The tail section crumpled, but it had stopped. Whitmore and his crew sprinted toward the wreck. Fire crew right behind them with extinguishers. Brennan sat motionless in the cockpit. His hands still gripped the control stick. His vision was almost gone. Grey tunnels with tiny pinholes of light. His ears rang. High-pitched whine drowning out all other sound. His lungs burned. Every breath tasted like smoke and copper. But he was on the ground. He'd made it. 12 seconds passed before he could move. Then he released the stick. Released his shoulder straps. Stood on shaking legs. Climbed out onto the wing. His legs buckled immediately. No strength left. He caught himself on the wing root. The aluminum was warm from aerodynamic friction. Whitmore reached him, grabbed his arm. "Sir, I got you. Easy now." Brennan let the sergeant help him down. His boots touched concrete. Solid ground. After 15 minutes of fighting for altitude, fighting for distance, fighting just to survive, solid ground felt like the most precious thing in the world. "Can you walk, sir?" Brennan tried. Managed 3 steps. Then his legs gave out entirely. Whitmore and Martinez caught him, lowered him to sitting position, back against the landing gear. "Get the flight surgeon," Whitmore ordered. Fire crew swarmed the engine, foam extinguishers hissing, smothering any potential fire before it could start. Brennan watched them work, watched the smoke dissipate, watched his destroyed aircraft become just another piece of damaged machinery. Devil's dice. The P-40 that had carried him through 43 combat missions, that had kept flying with a burning engine, that had survived being flown upside down for 11 minutes, would never fly again. Brennan felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not relief at surviving. Not pride in the mission. Just simple gratitude toward an inanimate object that had done its job beyond all reasonable expectations. "Thank you," he whispered. Whitmore heard him. "Sir, nothing. Just thank you for the assist, Sergeant."
"Any time, Lieutenant."
A jeep skidded to a stop. Colonel James Bradford stepped out. He was 46 years old, West Point, regular Army. He'd commanded the 81st Fighter Group for 18 months, lost 41 pilots in that time, watched young men burn, watched them disappear over the jungle and never return. He'd learned not to get attached, but seeing Brennan alive, sitting against that destroyed aircraft, after reports said he'd engaged 64 enemies alone, Bradford felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. He walked over, looked down at the lieutenant. "Brennan?" "Sir." "Did you engage that formation alone?" "Yes, sir." "How many aircraft?" 64, sir. 24 Sally bombers. Approximately 40 Oscar escorts." Bradford looked at the destroyed P-40, at the bullet holes, at the collapsed gear, at the smoke still rising from the cowling, then back at Brennan. "I gave specific orders," Bradford said quietly. "No pilot engages when outnumbered more than 5 to 1. You were outnumbered 64 to 1. "Yes, sir." "You disobeyed a direct order." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Brennan met his colonel's eyes. "Sir, they would have destroyed Dinjan. 63 wounded men in that hospital, 14 transports, 11 days' worth of fuel. Someone had to stop them."
Someone didn't have to be you.
"I was the only one there, sir. The math was simple. If I did nothing, Dinjan burns. People die. The hump stops. If I attacked, maybe I'd fail. Maybe I'd die. But maybe I'd scatter them enough to save the field. The second option had better odds." Bradford stared at him for a long moment. Everything he'd learned at West Point said this lieutenant should be court-martialed. Disobeying orders, reckless endangerment of military equipment, unauthorized solo combat engagement. Everything he'd learned in combat said this lieutenant should get a medal. "Get yourself to the flight surgeon," Bradford said finally. "That's an order I expect you to follow." "Yes, sir." Bradford turned, walked 3 steps, stopped.
He didn't turn around, just spoke over his shoulder. "Brennan, sir, I was wrong to order you back. Your brother, David." He would have been proud. Bradford climbed back in his jeep and drove away before Brennan could respond. Brennan sat very still. Bradford had known David, had been the one to write the letter to Brennan's parents when David's B-17 went down over the Solomon Islands, had been the one to tell Brennan personally, 6 months ago. The colonel had remembered. 2 medics arrived with a stretcher, helped Brennan onto it, carried him to the base hospital. The flight surgeon was Captain William Chen, 42 years old, Stanford Medical School. He'd been treating combat casualties for 2 years. He'd seen burns, shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, psychological trauma. He'd never seen carbon monoxide poisoning this severe in a conscious patient. Chen drew blood, ran tests, checked Brennan's eyes, his lungs, his heart. The carbon monoxide levels were extremely elevated. At these concentrations, most people would be unconscious. Some would be dead.
"Lieutenant, how are you even awake?"
Brennan's voice was hoarse, raw from smoke inhalation. "I needed to land the aircraft first." "You should have been unconscious 10 minutes ago." "I did the math, figured out how much consciousness I had left, rationed it." Chen stared at him. "You can't ration consciousness." "Apparently you can, sir." Chen made notes in Brennan's medical file. Ordered oxygen therapy, bed rest, observation for 72 hours minimum. Brennan didn't argue. He lay in the hospital bed, oxygen mask over his face, pure oxygen flooding his lungs, slowly displacing the carbon monoxide from his hemoglobin. His vision gradually cleared. The grey tunnels receded. Colour returned. His hands stopped shaking. His breathing eased. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in 43 combat missions, Merritt Brennan let himself believe he might actually survive this war. Merritt Brennan retired from the United States Air Force on June 30th, 1971. 30 years of service. Farm boy from Nebraska to full colonel. He'd flown P-40S in Burma, F-80S in Korea, F-86 Sabres over Mig Alley. He'd commanded squadrons, trained hundreds of pilots, watched aviation evolve from propellers to jets to supersonic fighters. He was 51 years old. He returned to Nebraska, to Kearney, to the same 320 acres where he'd grown up. His father had died in 1965. Heart attack in the South 40 while checking irrigation lines. The farm had sat mostly fallow since then. His mother, too old to manage it alone, had leased the land to neighbours. Brennan took it back, bought a tractor, planted wheat. He didn't talk about the war much. Neighbours who asked got short answers. "What did you do in the service, Merritt?" "Flew airplanes." "See any action?" "Some." That was all he'd say. The Silver Star sat in a drawer in his bedroom. He never wore it, never displayed it. Most people in Kearney didn't know he had it, but pilots knew. In 1952, the Air Force Historical Research Agency began conducting interviews with World War II veterans, preserving their stories, creating an oral history archive. They contacted Brennan, asked if he'd be willing to discuss his service. He agreed to one interview. 2 hours. No more. The interviewer was a young captain named Robert Hutchins, 30 years old, Vietnam veteran, helicopter pilot. He'd read Brennan's file before the interview. "Colonel Brennan, your record shows you engaged 64 enemy aircraft on December 13, 1943. Alone. Is that accurate?" "Yes." "Can you describe the engagement?" Brennan described it. Factually, without emotion. The numbers, the tactics, the mechanical failures. Hutchins took notes. "Sir, your file says you flew inverted for 11 minutes with a damaged aircraft. How is that possible?" "The controls were reversed from battle damage." Inverted flight made them work normally.
"But the fuel system, the engine. Flying inverted that long should have killed the engine."
"Should have. Didn't. Why not?" Brennan was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Maybe luck. Maybe the engine was too damaged to know it was supposed to quit. Sometimes machines keep running past their limits because they don't know any better." Hutchins wrote that down. "The intelligence report says you conducted an inverted glide approach with landing gear extended. That's never been documented before or since. It worked. But why did you think it would work?" "I didn't think. I calculated. Normal glide ratio with battle damage wouldn't reach the runway. Inverted glide reduced drag. The math said it might work. It did. You could have died." "I was already dying. The carbon monoxide, the engine failure. Crashing 200 yards short or crashing on the runway, the result was the same. Trying something different gave me a chance." Hutchins studied the older man. "Sir,
Do you consider yourself lucky? Brennan thought about that. No, I consider myself methodical. Luck is random. What I did was calculated. I knew the odds. I made choices based on math. Some worked, some didn't. The ones that worked kept me alive.
What about the 63 pilots from your group who didn't come home? Brennan's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. They made different calculations, or they ran into situations where no calculation mattered. Combat doesn't care about math, but math gives you better odds than guessing. The interview ended there. Hutchins's report became part of the official record, filed away, read by historians and researchers, occasionally cited in tactical studies. But Brennan himself faded into quiet obscurity. He farmed, he raised wheat and corn, he fixed his tractor when it broke. He lived alone in the farmhouse where he'd grown up. In 1982, a researcher from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum contacted him. They were developing an exhibit on the China-Burma-India theater. They wanted to interview veterans, feature personal stories. Brennan declined. Why not, sir? Your story is remarkable. It's not remarkable, it's what happened. Plenty of men did remarkable things. Most of them didn't come home. Tell their stories instead. But, sir, your inverted flight technique was desperation, not innovation. Any pilot in the same situation would have tried the same thing. Actually, sir, several pilots have been in similar situations since then. None of them attempted inverted flight. They died in crashes. Brennan was quiet for a long time. Then they made different choices. I'm not special for surviving. I'm lucky. There's a difference. The researcher persisted. Colonel, the Air Force uses your engagement as a case study in aerial tactics. Your decision to attack despite impossible odds, your energy management, your damage control. It's taught at the Air Force Academy. Good. Maybe it'll help someone. But I don't need to be there for that. He hung up. The years passed. Brennan turned 60, then 70. The farm became harder to manage. He sold most of the equipment, leased the land again, kept the farmhouse. He read books, watched the news, followed aviation developments, the F-117 stealth fighter, the Gulf War, precision-guided munitions. War had changed, aircraft had changed, but the fundamentals remained the same. Energy management, situational awareness, making decisions under pressure. The math hadn't changed. In 1998, the Air Force Historical Foundation organized a reunion of China-Burma-India theater veterans. 60th anniversary of the theater's establishment. They invited all surviving members of the 81st Fighter Group. Brennan almost didn't go, but something made him change his mind. Maybe curiosity, maybe loneliness, maybe the knowledge that he was 77 years old and there wouldn't be many more opportunities. He drove to Colorado Springs, to the Air Force Academy. 43 veterans attended. Out of the hundreds who'd served with the Burma Banshees, 43 were still alive. They gathered in a conference room. Old men now. White hair, wrinkled skin, bodies bent by age, but their eyes were sharp, their memories clear. They told stories. Captain William Morrison remembered the mission over Rangoon when his wingman's aircraft was hit. Morrison had stayed with him, talked him through the emergency landing. The wingman survived. Major Thomas Chen described the time his entire flight was jumped by 12 Oscars. They'd fought their way out, lost one aircraft, but the other 3 made it home. Technical Sergeant Clayton Whitmore was there too. 84 years old now, still sharp, still precise. He saw Brennan across the room, walked over. Colonel Brennan. Clay, good to see you. They shook hands. I never told you this, Whitmore said, but I almost shot you down that day, December 13th. Saw you coming in inverted. Thought you were Japanese, had my finger on the trigger. I know, I saw you at the gun position. What stopped you from waving me off? You must have seen us aiming at you. Brennan smiled slightly. I was too busy trying not to crash. Besides, if you'd shot me down, I'd have deserved it. Coming in like that. Crazy approach. It worked. It worked. They stood quietly for a moment. Colonel, can I ask you something? Sure. Why'd you do it? Attack 64 aircraft alone. You could have shadowed them, waited for backup. No one would have blamed you. Brennan looked at the other veterans in the room. Old men who'd been young warriors once, who'd faced impossible odds and survived. Or hadn't survived. The ghosts were there too, the ones who didn't make it to old age. Because I did the math, Brennan said. If I waited for backup Dinjan burns, 63 wounded men die. The hump stops. Chiang Kai-shek's forces lose their supplies. Maybe the Japanese push further into China. Maybe more Americans die later because we lost momentum. Or I attack alone. Maybe I die. Maybe I fail. but maybe I scatter them enough to save the airfield. The math said attacking gave better odds than waiting. That's cold calculation. That's survival. In combat, emotion kills you. Math gives you a chance. Whitmore nodded. You taught a lot of pilots that philosophy. Some of them flew in Vietnam, some in the Gulf. They said you always told them, do the math, trust the numbers, don't trust feelings. Did it help them? Some came home.
Some didn't. But the ones who came home said your lessons saved their lives. Brennan looked away. I'm glad. Later that evening, the veterans gathered for a formal dinner. The commandant of the Air Force Academy gave a speech, honored their service, thanked them for their sacrifice. Then he called Brennan to the podium. Colonel Merritt Brennan, Silver Star recipient, ace, commander, instructor.
Your engagement on December 13th, 1943, changed tactical doctrine in the China-Burma-India theatre. Your inverted flight technique has been studied by every fighter pilot class since 1955. Your decision-making under pressure exemplifies the warrior ethos we teach here. Would you share a few words with us? Brennan stood, walked to the podium, looked out at the assembled veterans, at the young cadets in the audience, future pilots, future warriors. He spoke quietly, without notes.
I'm not good at speeches, but I'll tell you what I learned. December 13th, 1943. I faced 64 Japanese aircraft alone. People call it heroic. It wasn't. It was mathematics. I had 12.8 seconds of ammunition, 90 minutes of fuel, 1 damaged aircraft. The odds said I'd die. But the odds also said Dinjan airfield would burn if I did nothing. I chose to change the odds, not through heroism, through calculation. Every decision I made that day was based on numbers. Fuel consumption, ammunition expenditure, glide ratios, descent rates. When my controls failed, I didn't panic. I analyzed the physics. Inverted flight reversed the control inputs. The math said it might work. I tried it. It worked. When my engine quit 2 miles from base, I didn't give up. I calculated glide performance. Normal glide wouldn't reach the runway. Inverted glide reduced drag. I tried it. It worked. Everything I did came from understanding the machine, understanding physics, understanding math. Not from courage, from knowledge. Young pilots, you'll face impossible situations, 64-1 odds, systems failures, decisions where every choice looks like death. In those moments, don't trust your feelings, don't trust luck, trust the math. Calculate your fuel, calculate your ammunition, calculate your options, then choose the one with the best numbers. Sometimes the best numbers still aren't good, but they're better than guessing. I'm alive because I did the math. 63 pilots from my squadron aren't here because they ran into situations where math couldn't save them. I'm not better than them. I'm not braver. I'm just lucky that my situations had mathematical solutions. Honor them by being smarter than I was, by learning from what worked and what didn't, by teaching the next generation to calculate before they act. That's all I have to say. Brennan returned to his seat. The room was silent for a moment. Then applause. Long. Sustained. But Brennan wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at the empty chairs, the ones reserved for veterans who didn't survive to attend. 63 chairs, 63 names on a memorial plaque, the ones who didn't make it home. After the reunion, Brennan returned to Nebraska, to his quiet farm, to his books and his memories. He died peacefully on February 18th, 1998. Heart failure in his sleep. He was 77 years old. His funeral was held in Kearney. Small service, family, a few neighbors, veterans from the local WW post. The Air Force sent a color guard. 6 active duty pilots. They folded the flag from his casket, presented it to his nephew. Then 6 P-40 Warhawks flew overhead, restored aircraft from a civilian warbird collection. They'd flown in from all over the country for this moment. They performed a missing man formation, 5 aircraft in tight V. The 6th pulled up and away, climbing into the sky, leaving an empty space in the formation. The sound of their Allison engines echoed across the Nebraska plains. The same sound Brennan had heard on December 13th, 1943. The sound of a P-40 at full power, screaming, determined, refusing to quit. Brennan was buried in the Kearney Cemetery. Simple headstone, no elaborate inscription. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Brennan, USAF. He did the math. 7 months after Brennan's death, the Air Force Historical Research Agency declassified additional documents from the China-Burma-India theatre. Among them was a captured Japanese after-action report from December 13, 1943. The report was written by Captain Takeda Hiroshi, the Sally bomber formation leader who'd turned back from Dinjan.
It had been translated in 1952 but kept classified for 46 years.
The translation read, "Mission to Dinjan airfield aborted due to unexpected enemy fighter interception. Single American P-40 attacked formation at 09:27 hours. Aircraft appeared from sun. Achieved complete surprise. Lead bomber destroyed in first pass. Formation scattered. Attempted to reform but American pilot continued aggressive attacks. Demonstrated exceptional gunnery. Ignored escort fighters. Focused attacks on bomber formation. Escorts engaged American aircraft multiple times. Scored hits. American aircraft damaged. Trailing smoke. Controls appeared compromised. Pilot continued attack. At 09:42 hours, bomber formation commander decided to abort mission. Formation integrity destroyed. Bombing accuracy impossible. Risk to bomber crews too high. Formation turned southeast, returned to base. American fighter did not pursue. Last visual showed aircraft trailing heavy smoke, descending toward jungle, presumed destroyed. Recommendation. American pilots demonstrate greater aggression than previous encounters. Single fighter willing to engage superior force suggests change in tactical doctrine. Recommend increased escort ratios for future missions. Assessment: American pilot either exceptionally skilled or insane. Result was same. Mission failed. The report was signed by Captain Takeda Hiroshi, dated December 13, 1943. American intelligence had tracked Takeda after the war. He'd survived. Returned to Japan. Became a commercial pilot for Japan Airlines. Flew Douglas DC-3s, then DC-6s. In 1952, during the occupation period, American Air Force historians had interviewed him. Takeda was asked about December 13, 1943. "I remember that mission," he said through a translator. "We were confident. We had overwhelming superiority. 64 aircraft against maybe a few defenders. We expected easy victory. Then one fighter attacked us. Just one. He came from nowhere. Hit the lead bomber before we saw him. We scattered. My co-pilot said it was a mistake. One fighter couldn't stop 64. We should reform and continue. But that pilot kept coming. Every time we reformed, he attacked again. He was damaged, smoking, obviously dying, but he wouldn't stop. I made the decision to abort. My crew protested. We had the numbers. We had the advantage. But I told them a man who attacks 64 enemies alone is either crazy or doesn't care if he dies. Either way, he will kill many of us before we kill him. The mission is not worth the cost." We turned back. I reported mission failure. I expected punishment, but headquarters understood. They said if one American pilot could do that, what would a squadron do? After the war, I learned the pilot survived. I was glad. He deserved to survive. He fought like 10 men. Takeda had died in 1967, age 55, heart attack. He'd never met Brennan, never knew his name. But he'd remembered the mission for 24 years. The 81st Fighter Group. The Burma Banshees continued operations until August 1945. They destroyed 413 Japanese aircraft in aerial combat, 147 on the ground. They lost 63 pilots killed or missing. Their deaths' head-skull insignia became one of the most recognized markings in the China-Burma-India theater. After the war, the unit was deactivated, reformed during Korea, deactivated again, reformed in 1991 for the Gulf War. They still carry the Burma Banshees name, they still wear the Death's headskull, and they still tell the story of December 13, 1943, the day one pilot fought 64 enemies alone. In 2018, the Air Force Academy updated its tactical curriculum. They added a new case study, subject decision-making under extreme adversity. The case study analyzed Brennan's engagement, not the heroism, the mathematics, fuel consumption rates under combat power, ammunition expenditure per attack pass, glide ratio calculations, risk assessment under systems failure. The lesson wasn't about courage, it was about methodology, how to make decisions when every option looks like death, how to calculate probabilities when the odds are impossible, how to trust physics when nothing else is reliable. Student pilots study Brennan's mission. They calculate the same numbers he calculated. They see the same choices he faced. Then they're asked, what would you do differently? Most students say, wait for backup. The instructors show them the math. Dinjan burns while you wait. 63 men die. The mission fails. Then they ask, what did Brennan do right? The students learn. He changed the problem. Instead of trying to destroy 64 aircraft, he tried to scatter them. Different objective, different calculation, better odds. When his controls failed, he changed the problem again. Instead of trying to fly normally, he flew inverted. Physics reversed. Problem solved. When his engine quit, he changed the problem. Instead of trying to maintain glide, he reduced drag. Inverted glide. Physics again. Every impossible situation became a different kind of math problem. Every time Brennan found a solution, not through heroism, through understanding how things worked. The P-40 Warhawk never achieved the fame of the P-51 Mustang or the P-47 Thunderbolt. It was slower than both, couldn't fight effectively above 15,000 feet. By 1943, it was considered obsolete. But in the hands of determined pilots like Merritt Brennan, the rugged Curtiss fighter proved what mattered most in combat. Not the aircraft specifications, the pilot's skill, the pilot's knowledge, the pilot's willingness to calculate when others guessed. One pilot, one obsolete fighter. 64 enemy aircraft. December 13th, 1943. Merritt Brennan proved that impossible odds mean nothing when someone refuses to quit. His solution to damage controls, flying alternately inverted and upright for 11 minutes, defied every standard flying procedure. His inverted landing approach with gear extended had never been attempted before, has never been repeated since. Not because it's impossible, because it requires understanding the physics completely, trusting the math absolutely, and accepting that death is the price of failure. Brennan understood. Brennan trusted. Brennan accepted. And Brennan survived. In Lincoln, Nebraska, at the Strategic Air Command Museum, there's a small exhibit on Nebraska aviators. One display case contains a silver star, a black and white photograph of a young pilot standing beside a P-40 with the number 44 on the fuselage. A brief description. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt Brennan, Silver Star, December 13th, 1943. Engaged 64 enemy aircraft alone. Saved Dinjan Airfield. Flew 95 combat missions. Retired 1971. Most visitors walk past without stopping. The display is small, unremarkable, easy to miss. But sometimes a young person stops, reads the description, looks at the photograph. They see a 23-year-old farm boy who understood machines, who trusted mathematics, who made impossible decisions and survived because he did the math first. And maybe, just maybe, they learn something. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's calculation under pressure. That heroism isn't foolish bravery. It's informed risk-taking. That survival isn't luck. It's understanding how things work and using that knowledge when everything is falling apart. Merritt Brennan never wanted to be remembered as a hero. He wanted to be remembered as someone who did the math, made the calculation, chose the better odds. And that's exactly what he was. One man, one fighter, 64 enemies. Physics, courage, and 12.8 seconds of ammunition. The numbers said impossible. Merritt Brennan proved numbers don't know everything, but they give you a better chance than guessing, and sometimes a better chance is all you need.